try to keep efficiently the plan. Welcome to this session on sustainable urban mobility plans related with the mobility management. As Annette gave us in the keynote speech, is the hot issue of this conference. The summit is the hot issue. So, indeed, let me remind you, I believe all of you already know, there are planned 4 sessions on this issue. The first one is this one, and then there are other 3 that goes a little bit more into specific examples at level city level, whereas here we have 3 distinguished speakers. Nick Rampus from the United States, so we'll have a view from the United States in a quite interesting approach in terms of mobility and within the sustainability of surrounding, let me define this way. Then we will have Nathalie Carnes, that will report on the Ile-de-France sustainable planning, mobility planning. And then Suzanne Böhler will touch a very critical point in this, let me say, new approach towards planning. That means participation in the vision of multi-level governance. Let me say that in order to follow the directives given by the organization, we will try to stay within 20 minutes for each presentation. And if the speakers allow me, I will start the timer that will be at 19 minutes. So we'll have a minute to close. So let's start with Nick. Nick is director of the Alternative Commute Programs and Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, with long-lasting, more than 20 years experience in program development and mainly concentrated on sustainability. Big issue, I understand, was the commuter transport planning. And I think it's giving a quite interesting view of how mobility management fits with the surrounding where operate people. I will start with it.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm pleased to be here. And so one of my other hats that I wear, besides being the Director of Alternative Clean Programs in the Washington, D.C. region, is also chairman of the Transportation Demand Management Institute. So today what I'm going to do is give you a global perspective from TDMI's viewpoint on the importance of transportation demand management and mobility management when it comes to sustainability and certification through various programs, including the leadership in energy and environmental design, or what's commonly referred to as LEED, as well as the status with building research establishment, environmental assessment method, or GREEN here in the European community, as well as with the Green Star program this is through the Green Building Council in Australia. So TDMI is basically looking to provide practical advice and inspiration to sustainable transport practitioners. And today's session, as I mentioned, is going to focus on how the development of what is called here a SOM and complementary policies. These are everyday things that you are all doing in your responsibilities, can lead to a more productive environment, and one in which mobility management can basically be a little bit more effective. So with that, I just want to quickly give you a brief overview of TDMI. It's been in existence since the early 1980s. I decided to be part of it because it provided an opportunity for me to provide more resources to the TDM and mobility management community. I am currently, as I mentioned earlier, the chairman, and we do also have European representation. Mr. Colin Black is here from the UK, and he's on our board, and we would like to give a shout out to him today. What is our mission? Well, we're looking to establish TDMI as an international TDM sustainable group, basically facilitating information sharing. We know there's a lot of information already out there. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We basically want to collect it all and provide it in one-stop shopping. And so we're providing a lot of this information through a lecture series, and we also have compiled existing research and we house it in one location, which is on our website. The website is transportation2.org. We have a social media platform. If you haven't visited the site, I encourage you to do so. We do have a module that was recently released last week that allows the TDM mobility management professionals to essentially register themselves as part of the LEED certification process, at least in North America for right now. So, what I want to focus on, and I also want to basically let you know that we also had some other folks working on this, including Wells and Associates, Justin Shore, and we also had Peggy Schwartz, who basically put this together. We wanted to have a very strong tie-in to the TDM community, and we wanted to link the sustainable building industry in as part of what we're doing. This took a while to do. It wasn't an overnight process, but we were able to actually marry the two groups together, and now there's been a lot of dialogue going on. So, the first area I want to talk to is value, and what is that value to TDM regarding the entire building process. If you layer that on top of green building construction, the value increases in terms of points. So there's a certain point level, and then and it could be simple things like the type of heating that you have in the building. It could be other things in terms of what the building is constructed out of. But essentially, transportation also can layer on top of that and give you some additional points. So innovation in design is for new construction, or what we call NC. And then innovation in design is for existing building operations and maintenance. And this goes beyond all of the other requirements set forth in other LEED credits that are available to developers as well as building owners. There's also regional priority credits, and these are automatically assigned based on the location of that particular facility. So the top 3 types of certification listed are the ones that have TDM or mobility management elements. So today we're just going to focus on new construction and existing building and operations and management types of facilities. So I'd like to start off with new construction. TDM points are found under the Sustainable Sites category, and for that we have 26 total possible points, and there's 12 points that are specific to alternative transportation. Another way to look at the 12 points is that they are TDM related, and they are nearly 1/3 of the points required to get your building LEED certified. So how would the building get those 12 points? So it could be greater or equal to 2 bus routes. So depending on where the facility is, we want to maybe locate the project within a half a mile of rail, or perhaps within a 1/4 mile of the bus stops. You also provide storage, shower, and showers and a changing room for bicycle accommodations. And these would need to be within 200 yards of the building, or greater or equal to 5% of the building's users to be able to access that information. And that's on the commercial side. For residential, it would be covered storage greater to equal 15% of the individuals occupying that particular facility. You also can provide preferential parking spaces for low-emitting vehicles, as well as any fuel-efficient vehicles, and that can be greater or equal to 5% of your total parking inventory at that particular site. Also, looking at providing minimum parking, carpool and vanpool spaces, carpool and vanpool discounts, and no new parking. This would be equal or greater than 5% of your total parking at any particular site. So just to recap, when you apply these points towards varying levels of LEED new construction certification, you can see what a significant impact they have. You basically can move up the scale, and there are varying scales starting, with that you're certified, then you can go to the silver, and then to the gold. And then there are certain percentages that are associated with those particular levels. So again, TDM points fall into the category of sustainable sites, and this is for existing building sustainable sites. In terms of the actual LEED points, much like new construction, there are 26 points for the sustainable sites category. But this time, more than half of those 26 sustainable site points are from alternative transportation. So there's a little bit of a difference here. And another way to look at these 15 points, which are TDM related, is that they represent nearly 40% of the points to get your building LEED certified. So up to 40% of the points to get your building LEED certified could come from demand management or mobility management. So here's how you can get those points. You can do it through, first thing is mode split and surveys. So just basically coming up with the different modes of transportation the individuals at that particular site are using to get there. And it could be drive alone, carpool, vanpool, bus work week, transit, walk and bike, and you can basically come up with an average passenger occupancy. And you get this information by surveying the employees. Now in the U.S., the standard survey is issued by the South Coast Air Quality Management District in Los Angeles, and that's what the U.S. Green Building Council recommends. However, if you're in a locality that has a survey for the region, you can actually apply for an exemption and have the U.S. Green Building Council allow you to use that particular survey if they're aware of what the results are going to be. And so there are some areas in the country, like for instance in the Washington, D.C. region, we've done that, and so because we have a regional survey, we're able to substitute that survey instead of using the Air Quality Management District's survey. Let's see, I think we already covered that. So depending on what percentage of the people don't drive alone to work, you can get anywhere from 3 to 15 points. So to put this in context, the average percentage of people who don't drive alone, so for instance in the Washington, D.C. region, in the urban core, it's about 50% of the folks not driving alone. If you go a little further out in the inner suburbs, it's about 33%. And then if you go out to the suburban locations, it's about 17%. So there's something to be said about, particularly with buildings that are closer in and that they have the infrastructure there, and you have the correct setup to basically take a look at how you can get your building certified. If you get 15 points, you have nearly 40% of the points required for LEED certification, and 25% of points that are required for LEED Gold certification. So, if you leave with nothing else from today's presentation, I would suggest that you just remember that lots of LEED points can be acquired with relative ease if you go about attaining them in a strategic manner. Many of the strategies that you employ and what you do can actually be used towards these types of programs. So, going back to the Transportation Demand Management Institute and how this ties in, we believe that there needed to be a resource established in order for building owners and or facility managers to locate professionals such as yourselves in order to assist them with identifying transportation-related green building strategies. And so we teamed up, as I mentioned earlier, with the U.S. Green Building Council. And so this, you can't see this very well, but on the website, this essentially shows us listed as a resource. So when somebody goes to that site and needs public transport or transportation, they can come directly to the TBMI website and they can figure out who in their area can pump and assist them for these types of programs. Once the user is at the site, they just simply check the TDMI logo, you see it here, and that just brings them right to where we are located with all of the information that's available. And so that was a huge ordeal for us. We had to go there and we had several meetings with that particular group in order to get them on board, because typically our TDM professionals don't speak with the developers and the building owners, and that's just not a typical type of thing that happens. So in order to get them on board, to explain to them this is what we do and we can help many of your members get their LEED certification points, they agreed to it and they allowed us to basically go onto their website. So now moving to the European experience, as I mentioned earlier, there is the Building Research Establishment Environmental Assessment Method, or BREEAM. Currently there are 250,000 buildings with certified BREEAM assessments. And there were probably over 1 million that are registered for assessment since it was first launched back in 1990. How many folks in the room are familiar with BREEAM? Okay, so there are a few. So some of you know what it's all about. There is an assessment that uses measures performance that are set up against benchmarks, and this is done to basically evaluate the building specification, design, construction, and use. And usually these measures represent a number of different categories. It could be anything from energy to ecology. They also include items related to energy, water, the environment, but the important thing is that transportation is involved as part of this assessment. It does encourage designers, clients, and others to think about low carbon and low impact design of the buildings. And this obviously lessens the demand, as well as considering energy efficiency and low carbon technologies. So there are 5 key transport-related aspects in BREEAM. One is access, and I'm sure most of you know this, and this is general knowledge, so it's nothing that's out of the ordinary, but it's access to public transit, proximity to amenities, cyclist facilities, parking standards, as well as putting together a travel plan. And I know many of you are probably involved in putting together travel plans in one way or another. So I guess the key point here is that if any of your clients or anybody that you're working with is looking for BREEAM certification, one way to get them to that point is to let them know that, hey, if you're going through an assessment, here's the things that we can do to help you get through that assessment. So why is transport important? And I just use the UK as an example. Almost 3/4 of travel is by car, and that goes to work. Over 3/4 use their cars for food shopping. Over half use the car as transportation for school and childcare. And this, of course, all results in high emissions, particularly greenhouse gas emissions. So you can get credits by reducing those emissions through the location of your development. And this is very similar to what LEED is all about. Parking and cycling materials can be offered. Again, access to public transportation, local amenities, as well as policies that are put in place for that particular site. Now, moving on to Australia, we have a board member in Australia that's very familiar with the Green Star program, and this is developed by the Green Building Council in Australia. The tool was launched in 2002 by the Green Building Council, and there's probably about a little over 500 buildings that have been certified, which relates to about 8 million square meters of space. So there are rating tools that are used for offices, apartments, schools, essentially any building that's in the Australian economy. So the Green Building Council basically have STAR pilot rating tools for communities, interiors, and performance of existing buildings. And they're based on a number of different criteria, one of them being transportation. And again, that's a key component that is available to those building owners. There is a secondary rating tool called Neighbors, and this basically is used to rate the actual performance of the existing buildings, but transportation is not included in this rating. So their new performance rating tool does include transportation, but that's through the Green Building Council in Australia. So Now you're asking, why is this person coming all the way from the United States to tell me all about green buildings and sustainability and how that relates? So essentially what I want to talk to you about is how Florence can register as a green building resource. We're trying to build this not only in North America, but we'd like to expand this globally. And I'm here to learn from you. And I would also like to go back to our board of directors and talk about the experience here and maybe what some of your experiences have been with BREEAM, or if there's another rating system out there that we don't know about, and how could we marry what you're doing with that particular community. So on the T20 website, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these screens, but as you can see, we have the entire globe up in terms of resources that individuals can go to. And the way it works in the United States is you basically pick your location, you register, and then it gives you a star rating system in terms of what your experience and your level of expertise is. And then that developer or that building owner can go there and see, okay, I need some help with bicycling facilities. Here's who I'm going to talk to, and then here's what the rating looks like and what their experience is. And essentially, we're working with a lot of other associations in the United States, the American Institute of Architects, the Building Owners and Management Association. We're also looking at the Urban Land Institute. We'd like to just get other groups and get a synergy going to let their members know that this resource and this tool is available. So there's essentially basic contact information. You basically select your location. And then there are a number of areas that you fill in, including parking management, in your experience, bicycling accommodations, surveying, and if you've done anything in particular that educating employers, and then essentially you verify, it's a self-certification verification that you're able to provide these particular services. And with that, essentially what I'm here to ask the group is to basically, let me know what your thoughts are. Again, our overall goal is to integrate demand management and mobility management into this whole certification process. So whether it's LEED, BREEAM, Green Star, and then I'm sure there are others out there that we're not even aware of, we're essentially looking to investigate these opportunities. And we welcome your input and your feedback and encourage you to visit our website. The last thing I want to leave you with is that this is a very active program in the Washington, D.C. region. We have brochures and materials where our representatives that work with the employment community and the developers that go out and they will basically help with the certification process. So if anyone's interested, I have materials here, and thanks for your time. We're going to take questions at the end.
Well, the idea... the recommendation of the organizer was to take a question at the end. Now, because we started a bit late, and I believe that everybody likes to end on time, it's 5 o'clock for the cocktail, we can decide on spot if you want to have a few minutes for questioning Nick and maybe reacting. Or if we try to be strict on time, then have at the end about 10 minutes for an overall discussion and a set of question and answer. What do you prefer?
I think it's fair to have the questions.
Let's proceed.
It's still fresh.
Okay, great. That is my thing, because I forget everything after 2 minutes. Let's say, let me make, if you don't mind, a comment. I think that it is an approach quite interesting. I should say not usual, at least for my knowledge, in terms of approaching mobility management, or even this new trends of sustainable urban mobility plan. But in my view, and I would like to have also your comment beside questions to Nick, I think that is an interesting vision where one of the messages is that the sustainable urban mobility plan must be an added value integrating existing plan. In this case, we look at development, estate, plan, and buildings. And this is an approach that in our European vision probably goes also into the smart city concept. but I think it's very interesting. That's it. Any question? Can you say your name and affiliation, please?
Yeah. My name is Stefan Koch. I'm the computer plan manager for University College Cork in Ireland. Just one question. You talked a lot about how these ratings come together. What is the practical effect of having a rating, a silver, gold, platinum, leads rating in the marketplace, in the real estate business? And what's the practical use actually for building owner?
Yeah, from my experience, what I've seen, and this comes into the whole marketing aspect, there are developers who will say, as they're advertising and they're looking for tenants, come to this building because we're gold certified, and here are all the reasons why. And given that this is a kind of a new area where a lot of folks are very interested in the green movement, I think it's propelled companies to say, I think this is something that we'd like to do because our employees are demanding it, our corporate image is geared towards sustainability and the green movement, and I think it's created a very high interest level, I think, amongst the business community. And so and this is one area that we've been able to basically go in and say, look, this is great, and we're glad that you're doing this, and here's how we can help. We're here as a resource.
Any other question on that before?
I am Paul Morrison, University of Transport. I have one question more similar about the benefits for the building developer. Does it give any advantages in getting a permit for anything?
And that's a great question. I don't believe that any of our jurisdictions, at least in the Washington, D.C. region, I think there are goals that are set, but no one is requiring through the permitting process that you have to have sustainable buildings. Now, I think that some of the jurisdictions are looking at that, and they may have passed some, what I would say, passive types of suggestive ways that you can achieve, the gold building standard, or the LEED certification. But I think one thing that I've seen is that there's also a competition amongst a lot of the metropolitan areas to see who can have the greenest buildings in that particular metropolitan, and they'll advertise that to say, come to whatever, wherever it is, because many of our buildings are LEED certified, and it kind of pits one metro area against the other in a good way, though, to basically lure those companies there.
So you do influence the behavior of the building? That's right.
I think so, yeah. In the end, the developers are very interested in this, and building owners and managers, yes, absolutely. That's very competitive.
Surely it's a different approach from Europe in this sense. Fred, I think, was asking for...
Thank you, Fred Lotter from Austrian Building Research. In an average, how long does it take to undertake one certification? Month, weeks? And second question is, how much does it cost and who pays for it?
It can be a very lengthy process depending on what your goals are. So obviously the low level goes, if you just want to be certified, that probably won't take you very long. It may take you just a few months to maybe get through that process. But if you want to go for the gold standard, there are a lot of different things that you need to provide, and there's a lot of documentation. And in terms of who pays, well, it's going to be the building owner, because that's essentially who owns that facility. And then in the end, obviously, those costs are passed on to whoever decides to lease that particular space. I'm sure that there's going to be some type of cost for those individuals, for those companies.
And in average, how much does it cost?
It's going to depend on the size of the building and the number of things that you're looking at getting certified. So if it's, like as I mentioned, if it's just vanilla certification, it's probably not going to cost. And I don't have the cost off the top of my head, but it's probably not going to cost a whole lot. But if it's anything higher than that, then the costs are going to escalate. And you can, it's probably going to, depending on what you do. If you, depending on, let's just take water as an example. If you want to put in, high eco-driven water system, then the cost just of that is going to be much higher than your standard water system. Same with your heating and your ventilation, depending on what you're looking at putting on. The higher you go in terms of those levels, the more cost is going to be to that developer. It's not going to be at a low level, but if you put something plain vanilla in, you know, your costs are going to be much lower. So that's going to vary depending on the facility.
Yeah.
Yes, do you mind if I take
Okay.
last question from you? Because otherwise we take time. No, no, please, if it's a quick question, we have taken it, but sorry.
Yeah, I understood that the LEED certification is implemented for commercial buildings.
And residential as well.
Okay, yeah. And is LEED certification also implemented for transport-related facilities, for example, metro stations? Because I know that in Europe, some transport companies have been trying to implement green measures for metro station, and it's not easy because the criteria are made for commercial and residential buildings.
So
There's such a case in the US.
So you're talking about the actual train stations,
Exactly.
and like bus facilities? Well, I mean, I think if they meet the prescribed guidelines, I don't think there's any reason why they shouldn't be able to get LEED certified. I can imagine, you know, why they wouldn't be certified. I haven't heard of that, but and also, you know, maybe I'll defer to Colin on the green. Have you heard of anything on the train station staff being able to get green certification?
In the UK, what tends to happen is the biggest investors in development property are now the pension fund owners, and the pension fund managers insist on all their buildings being green accredited.
Okay.
And it's a bit like the European vehicle standards. As soon as they reach the category 4, a new category comes in, and then the next tranche of properties will have to be at the next level. So it's an evolving progress, and mobility management is becoming more and more part of it.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. Let's move to the second presentation that will be given by Nathalie Granes. She's the director of the mobility planning of the region Île-de-France, and I think will be a quite interesting first large area example of how the mobility management has been integrated in a sustainable urban mobility plan at regional level. Quite big, important, and densely populated area.
Okay, thank you. I'm not the director of the transport department of the region. I'm just the head of a small unit called the travel strategy and mobility management policy.
Okay.
And I'm in charge of the revision of the SUMP at the region Île-de-France. So the
You are the
purpose.
person there.
Sorry?
You are the person there.
Okay, yes. So, which one? Here? Okay, fine. Sorry. The purpose of my speech today will be to present you our mobility management strategy and how it's been integrated in the SUMP. But first of all, I will make a brief, short introduction to give you the key figures to present you the regional context and the characteristics, the main characteristics of mobility in Île-de-France. So, here's a map of the Île-de-France region. As you can see, it's a very large territory, it's about 12,000 square kilometers. We have about 12 million of inhabitants and about 5.6 million of jobs. It corresponds to about 20% of the population and of the jobs of France, the national figures. But we also have a very complex administration system with about 1,600 local authorities dealing with different subjects, different matters, and with complex interaction at the different levels. And as you can see on the map, we have different, we can split the territory in three parts. We have the heart of the territory, which is a high urban density. Then we have the central urban area, and on the rest of it, which is here in yellow, it's mainly rural or agricultural territory. So we have high differences of the situation. As far as mobility is concerned, we have more than 41 million trips per day. And the first mode is walking, with about 39%, and just followed by motorized vehicles with 38%. and public transport represents only 20%, and cycling is very low, less than 2%. And our trips are characterized by short distances. 64% of trips are less than 3 kilometers, and amongst them 22% of car trips are less than 1 kilometer. For the commuting trips, they represent only 28% of total trips, but 41% of long-distance trips and 61% of these commuting trips are made by car. So it's really a big challenge for our transport policies in the region, for all the congestion issues, but also for the environmental and social aspects. For the environmental aspects, transport is the second factor of greenhouse gas emission, with 30% of all the emissions. And for the social aspects, we spend a lot of time in transportation, about 80 minutes per day, and amongst these 80 minutes, 68 minutes per day in average for commuting trips. So, and we know that because of many studies highlight the negative impacts on travel time, on health, and the health of the salaries. So, and now here's a series of 4 slides just to illustrate the increase of the commuting distances over the last decades, due to urban sprawl. So this was in 1975, 1982, 1990, and beginning of the 2000s. And what you see in red is when the commuting distance are more than 25 kilometers and up to 65 kilometers. So it's really a problem, and we have to deal with that. So what are the solutions? Well, a lot of people and a lot of politicians are waiting for a huge project, and especially the Grand Paris project, which is a very interesting industrial project, but on a very long term and very expensive, and only public transport infrastructures. So it's very interesting, but it doesn't answer the needs we have every day, in the everyday life to go to work and for the commuting trips. So what else can we propose? So this is the purpose of the mobility management strategy we have developed in the Région Île-de-France. So the starting point, it was in 2007 with a European project called Commerce, and whose aim was to promote company travel plans all over Europe. Région Île-de-France was a leader partner in this project with Great London, and together we had to define common standards to get high quality travel plans and to provide tools to help the companies develop their own travel plans. And it's been a good opportunity for us to realize that we have a real expertise, a real know-how about travel plans in the region, and many partners were already involved in developing travel plans. So we decided to develop our own regional strategy, and we called it Pro-Mobility. It was in 2009. It's mainly based on the commerce deliverables, and we decided to adapt and implement the commerce tools, but to adapt it to the regional context. And we wanted to develop this regional approach to get a high visibility of what was done all over the territory. And we fixed ourselves quantitative and qualitative objectives based on the commerce deliverables. So our regional strategy, because of the large diversity of the situation on the territory, we decided to focus on areas mobility plans to look for a scale effect. Areas mobility plans, it means different companies or different establishments, public or private, it doesn't matter, but working together to deliver one shared travel plans. And to get higher visibility, we also decided to communicate under a brand name, and the brand name was Pro-Mobility. But we also realized that we had to create a specific dynamic between the regional level and the local level. So for that, to implement our strategy, we developed 3 types of interventions. First of all, we organized a regional governance system based on networking. And we developed tools, and we proposed also financial aids. So As for the governance regional, the regional governance system, as I told you, we identified, thanks to commerce projects, the fact that many different partners were already involved in company travel plans. So we decided to gather all these regional public or private partners to work together and to keep on a dynamic about public travel plans. So now we are nine partners. We call pro-mobility partners, and we are working together, and we are stimulated by the same goal to develop travel plans. But it was not enough. We have set up our regional level partnerships with pro-mobility to deal with the strategic issues. But to be able to go at the operational level, we organize different networks. So first of all, with the different project holders within the companies in charge of delivering their travel plans, we organize a club. When I say we, it's not the region alone, but all the pro-mobility partners. We organize a club for all the project holders, so that they can meet on a monthly basis and exchange their ideas, their advice, their difficulties, their questions, and they can discuss peer-to-peer. And we are here, and we can also deliver our vision of what is good travel plans, and also we can hear their difficulties, and we can, it's a help for us to adapt our tools and our support to meet their needs. And in between the regional and local level, it was necessary to organize an interface, intermediary level, because we have a lot of companies. We have about 700,000 companies in Ile-de-France, and we were not able to be always available for their questions. So we encourage the development of mobility advisors to be the direct contact point of the companies, of the firms. So they have to answer all the companies' solicitations, and they have to go to the companies to make them aware of what is a travel plan and what is interesting to develop travel plans. And in fact, this is a combination of these three levels that draws our regional governance system as far as mobility management is concerned. Then we develop many different tools to help companies. So a guide directly coming from the commerce deliverables. We developed a visual identity based on a nice Swiss knife. We created a dedicated website. We also make videos to explain what is pro-mobility, what is a mobility advisor, what is a real travel plans. We organize each year an annual forum. We've set up a tailored training session to mobility advisors, and we still are working on a monitoring and evaluation tool at the regional scale, but linked with what is going on at the national level. And then, third type of intervention, we have developed financial aids to develop concrete actions. So we can finance up to 60% of the creation of mobility advisors' jobs during the first 3 years, and we also propose financial aid to help the companies in the concrete implementation of the action plan. So that's what we've built since 2009, but all the mobility management actions, they were seen as something like interesting, like a nice extra, but politicians were not convinced of the importance of integrating mobility management into the different planning documents. So we still had to have a more formal, more institutional recognition of mobility management policies. And this is what we've done with the revision of the SUMP, what we call Plan Déplacement in French. So this revision was a great opportunity for us, at least for 3 reasons. First of all, there was an institutional evolution. that transferred the responsibility of the SUMP, the revision of the SUMP, to the region. Before it was a government's responsibility. With this new SUMP, it's the region. To be precise, it's a shared responsibility between Région Île-de-France and the Regional Transport Authority, depending on the steps of the process, because it's a very long process. But the region is on the front line and is politically responsible for the approbation of the plan. Then we have a legislative evolution that makes it obligatory, mandatory to deal with travel plans in the new SUMP. And we had a specific context because over the last 3 years, between 2010 and 2013, the region has been in charge of the revision of all its major planning documents regarding environment, land use and spatial planning, and also transport planning, but also about waste, about biodiversity. And all these documents are linked together with mandatory links, and they are all led by the region, so they have to be coherent between themselves. And it's really a great opportunity, especially because the environment planning documents, they insist on the transport issues and on the necessity to change habits in the transport if you want to achieve our goals as far as air quality and climate change is concerned. So through all of this architecture, SUMP is at the crossroads of all the main land use and transport and environment planning documents at a regional scale, but also at a local scale. So how we took advantage of this situation? Well, we organize feedback, and we work with all of our networks and contact points and with the mobility advisors. And we organize workshops and meetings and conferences to get feedback, figures, to get overviews, to get expectations, to get information of what was done on the territory. And then we capitalize all that stuff and propose notes to explain what was the mobility management stakes, the Région Île-de-France, what was done, and to suggest concrete actions to foster the development of mobility management through the document, through the planning documents. And all this work, and thanks to this high mobilization, it allows us to deliver a collective and a coherent message around mobility management stakes. And it showed that a lot of people were already engaged into mobility management actions in the region. So it was very, very important. And thanks to this high mobilization, we were in the place, and we won our case. And we obtained that mobility management was integrated at its part in the new SUMP. So, how does it work? The new SUMP is divided in 9 challenges, and there is one specific challenge dedicated to mobility management. So it's really, really a big change. It's a new balance between infrastructure proposition and mobility services. And behind the dedicated challenge, the whole SUMP is more open to alternative mobility, alternative to car mobility. And it's talking about biking, walking, car services, also talking about better articulation between land use planning and between transport. So it's really a new kind of SUMP for us. So this is the 9 challenges. And as you can see, the last one is the mobility management. And all the SUMP is organized towards a pragmatic and operational direction. So for each challenge, there is different actions that are identified, and for each action, there is a pilot, there is a budget, and there is objectives, quantitative objectives to be achieved. And this is important because in that way, SUMP has played a role like a springboard for us, because thanks to the great participation of our networks, they have been identified as leaders for to pilot the mobility management challenge. So it's a great recognition. And now we have many requests to introduce mobility management stakes in different seminars and conferences in the region. And we hope it will help to include mobility management actions earlier upstreams in the local planning development process. Okay, and as an example of how we can make it more operational, this SUMP, because SUMP is only a planning document, so it's a good framework, but we have to decline to make it operational. And as a region, we decided to build a new regional plan for a sustainable mobility called PRMD in French. And the idea is to define, to revise all of our transport policies to be as a mirror, an echo to the 9 challenges of the new SUMP. So we have 12, in fact 13 framework policies and in our new PRMD. And the idea was to make it clear that the new SUMP must become a reference for all the transport policies in the region, regional and local transport policies. And we have to work together in the same way if you want to achieve and to maximize the impact of the SUMP. And so, as a region, we wanted to set up clearly our new priorities through these different framework policies. And also to provide means and resources for delivering our own policies, but also to encourage the actors to commit themselves into these new priorities defined by the new SUMP. So, it's time.
1 minute to finish.
Okay, so the last one. But just as an example, through the 12 framework policy, we have our own mobility management policy, which go a little bit further than pro-mobility policy before, because we get together pro-mobility, which is for firm companies, travel plans, but also all what we developed in direction of school, to develop school travel plans. And we go on our support to develop mobility advice in Ile-de-France. And we also develop new kind of support to the development of new mobility services, like car sharing, carpooling, work at home. And we try to impulse, again, always new dynamics around these topics. Okay, thank you.
I think that your presentation will stimulate quite a bit of questions or comments. So the floor is open. Let's try to be in about 5-6 minutes on this. We will start. Okay, good. Can you tell again your name?
Sorry. Colin Black from Contemporary Transport.
All right.
Do you have a ring-fenced budget for your mobility management strategy in Paris? Do you have a specific fund or
Budget?
Fund, yes, budget, yes.
and how much is it?
Not very high, but enough to develop our mobility management action. But it's going, it's growing year after year. So we began with, we have a budget for how to say, investment and for operational.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and for investment we have about 2 million for the whole region. And for the exploitation, operational aspects, we have, the first year we have 100,000 euros. And now we have a budget of 600,000 euros. But it's peanuts compared to the whole transport budget of the Région Ile-de-France.
So 600,000 euros.
Sorry?
You say 600,000 euros?
600,000 euros.
Could I just ask how that compares to Nick in Washington DC, what your TDM budget is?
Our budget is about a little over $5 million.
Okay. I find this fascinating.
Yeah, but what does it
To
cost?
tell you the budget, the
Investment
transport
and
budget of Région Île-de-France, it's more than 1 billion euro.
Yes. And it's the same in London. Still, mobility management is a tiny proportion of the overall. And you look at places like Washington DC, we don't necessarily look to them for inspiration, but they do a lot of good things, and one of the good things they have is a ring-fenced budget for TDM, which is very, very helpful.
Hello, my name is Maris Hoske. I work for the municipality of Oslo. I'm really interested in the network you have with the businesses. So I was wondering what sort of cooperation do the public have with these companies? What sort of role does the public take in that network?
Well, main role was to organize this network. In fact, we realized that during the commerce project that many companies were trying to develop company travel plans, but they were completely split. They were alone in their own trying to develop this. And the main role we have is to get them together so that they can see that they are not alone. They share the same questions and the same difficulties. And we, as ProMobility partners, we organize and provide some support, some tools, some advice, and also what was important for the companies was to show them that all public partners, we agreed on the fact that it was necessary to impulse something about company travel plans, to make something to help transport issues for commuting trips. So the fact that we were all speaking the same language and delivering the same message, it helped to give us assurance to the companies that we were working in the same direction.
Have you received any signs from the companies that they are benefiting from cooperating closer, not only for mobility and for ideas and sharing knowledge, but also in terms of other kind of competition? Are they co-located? Are they cooperating on their mobility plans?
Some of them are, yes, cooperating, as you said, on mobility actions. And there are, when we organize our annual forum, each year we have more and more participants to hear what is going on about mobility management in the Région Île-de-France. At the beginning we were less than 100 participants, and now it's the fifth forum we organize, and we are around 200 participants. So it's really a great dynamic.
Any other questions?
Yes,
sure.
So now the next one, how is the progress determined and how is it measured in terms of progress in meeting?
How we can measure the evolution?
Yeah.
Okay, we've built since last year a database. Okay, based on all the information we can have, all the feedback we can have from the mobility advisors. So we co-finance these jobs, and so they have obligation to give us feedback and quantitative feedbacks. And we organize, we structure the database, and several times per year, so 2 or 3 times per year, they give us information about what is happening on their territory, and which companies they are dealing with, and what is in which steps are the companies in developing the travel plans. If they are just an idea, or are they already involved in a diagnosis, or are they trying to implement some actions? And so we know, but it's very recent, it's only from now, we have a pretty good vision of how many companies are involved in travel plan and areas travel plans, which is our goal, and in which steps of the process they are engaged.
Okay. If there is no other question, we wish to thank Natalie. And let's go to the next speaker, that is Suzanne Böhler. I think that already Natalie gave a quite interesting picture of, first of all, integrating plans. That is one of the key words in considering the framework for the SAM, and also a certain level of participation, at least from the companies. Participation, according to the guideline, it's delivered by the EC. It's a quite crucial point. It's one of the most important, let's say, innovation in the planning approach and the governance. Suzanne is currently working at the Ruprecht Consult, that has been the one company that has developed the guidelines on SUMP, and therefore is the right person to speak about the issue of participation. She has a quite long-standing experience in sustainability in transport and related issues like energy from the Wuppertal Institute, and you joined in
last year.
12.
Yeah, 2013 last year.
Okay, all right. So,
yeah.
Suzanne, I will keep time on you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, good afternoon, everyone. I think I continue a little bit the presentation from Annette today, when she said, is SMT the new black? And probably, like you already mentioned, Maurizio, that maybe at least the ambition targets to integrate the public and stakeholders, especially, and it's a very good example from Italy, I think, is somehow an innovation in the planning process. So yes, I think you already introduced ourselves, our company, and we carried out or developed together in a very extensive consultation process with European stakeholders, the guidelines, not ourselves, but we were the lead authors, and we are all managing a project I would like to introduce to you, which is the Challenge Project. So main findings are taken from the Challenge Project, which is an SMP related project. And but first I would like to tell you something about the policy context and also about the targets and the reason why it is important to integrate citizens and stakeholders into the planning process, how European what are the findings of Challenge, how cities deal with citizens' participation, stakeholders, and would also like to give you some good examples, and last but not least some conclusions from my side. At the end, participation is a question of democracy. So of if you allow people to develop own ideas, and probably also to decide what is going to happen in the city. So terms you come across are direct democracy, for example, or bottom-up approach, and in contrast to top-down approaches. And both you can find in European countries and all over the world. But in every policy field, the question how people are integrated in governance processes is quite a big issue. And I think in transport planning there are certain experiences, but not so extensive than in other fields like the energy sector, for example. Also a historical view to a lady, and she developed the letter of citizen participation in 1969 already, and I think she's one of a pioneer, where she said that there are different steps to involve people. You can decide not to involve or not participate, have a non-participation approach, or it can lead to that the citizens take over the power. So not very new, and what is also not, or what has happened nowadays is that we see in different places that there are very controversial debates, especially in the transportation sector. Here is an example from Bucharest in Romania, and only one example where you can see that transport planning is quite a controversial area. And here the government decided to tear down historical buildings in order to build a new boulevard, representative boulevard, and this was stopped by demonstration actions, and then a bottom-up approach occurred, and the new planning process started from the beginning on. So this was quite, I think, for decision makers, this must be a shock, because they thought everything has been in place, our planning has been finalized, and everything looks good. And then there were big protests, and everything was stopped. And you might also know the situation in Stuttgart, where a similar development has taken place. So from the theoretical point of view, what is the benefits if people are involved in planning processes, like in transport planning processes? So it can include new ideas and knowledge, because all the time knowledge is limited. Even if in a transportation department, well, maybe a lot of different disciplines are working, you receive, if you integrate different perspectives and different interests, you get new ideas and knowledge, but also probably new problems, and you create new conflicts. So that's not always. It has definitely a positive side, but also a lot of questions occur when you're talking about participation. So you increase the range of options, and the whole situation becomes more complex. But transport planning is a complex thing, and SUMP is even more complex. So it tests evidence and positions, and it addresses addressing uncertainty and conflicts. And this is something what is quite, if we're talking about strategical development of transportation, of urban transport, to have a transparency about uncertainty of plannings, and if you anticipate the conflicts in advance. I think that's a very, very positive thing. So this is an expectation or an observation that this happens in a lot of cities where transport planners anticipate potential conflicts. They decide
to carry out a participation process. So let's go back to sustainable urban mobility planning as the, let's say, the framework for participatory approaches. So sustainable urban mobility planning is target-oriented. It's a long-term vision and has it comprises or it encloses a clear implementation plan. It should cover economic, ecological, and also social issues. Targets are very important. They should be ambitious. They're concrete and measurable, and a result of a dialogue process. This is quite a very interesting thing, the setting of targets, quantifiable targets, which is in our observation quite difficult sometimes for cities to set those quantifiable targets, and sometimes this makes the difference. We talked about in the morning of the example of Copenhagen, and there you can see for example, that they set very clear targets, and they have a kind of a monitoring and an assessment where they can say, okay, this has been reached so far. It's a process. Sustainable urban mobility planning is a process, and it's dialogue oriented. It comprises the involvement of stakeholders and citizens' participation, and it should cover all modes. And cooperation is also a very important aspect, like Natalie already presented, the cooperation between different stakeholders, but also city departments, and also different administrative levels. The European policy context for sustainable urban mobility planning is the Urban Mobility Package, which was released in December of last year. And it has an annex which lays out the concept for sustainable urban mobility planning. And within this package, sustainable urban mobility plans are the central element. And there is a strong recommendation within the package to local and regional authorities to develop and implement SUMPs. It's not a directive, but it's a very strong recommendation. The guidelines, they were released on the same day like the urban mobility package. And in parallel to that, there will be a European platform set up on SUMP. This is a picture you have seen already, which was shown by Annette. This is the finding about the status of SUMP in Europe, in European countries, in Europe, in European cities. What we see that there are no common practice, but there are basic approaches visible in European cities, and there has been a positive development within the last 10 years. So there are more cities which have a better and more strategic planning processes. And what we see is that every city does something, but nobody is perfect. And what we see as well is that most of the city have kind of participation processes, but the variety is quite high. So the difference is if participation processes are more on a mandatory level to inform the public, or if they are very complex participation processes carried out and with very innovative tools, for example. Typical problems of urban transport planning. There is too much focus on urban centers instead of on transport regions. So again, the Ile-de-France is quite a very good example as a good example to cover really a transport region of traffic flows. There is a poor collaboration between decision makers. between administration and also with the political level. There's a lack of target and the lack of monitoring, evaluation of the plan and measure implementation. Actually, there's a lot, very less experience with monitoring, evaluation of the plan itself and of monitoring of the measures. And last but not least, very poor stakeholder involvement and participation. So one of the projects which tries to improve the situation or the knowledge bases for European cities, the challenge projects, which we are coordinating together with different support partners, but the core of the project are 9 partner cities and follower cities, and altogether we are now, I think, 36 cities following this project, and we are addressing different fields of problems which occur during the transport planning processes, which is participation, the cooperation, so the cooperation between different departments and neighboring cities, the process of measure selection, and the monitoring and evaluation. These are the 4 main challenges. There we try to find and together with the cities, new procedures and new tools and approaches which could be successful and which can be transferred to other cities. What we did was kind of a self-assessment, and what we see, it's not so, can't read it very properly, but this table shows the self-assessment of the city if they have a full SUMP in place like Vienna or Dresden, or if they have more SUMP, if they have an SUMP under development, if they have more topical plans like a public transport plan or a cycling plan. This is the situation in a lot of cities, and if they have no plans in place, this is also the situation in European cities that they don't have plans in place, but these are only a few cities. So we carried out a survey with 36 cities, which showed that all cities, even the starter cities, which start with SUP, has experiences with participation, but if it comes to more complex, complex processes, there is definitely less experiences in the starter cities as well as in the advanced cities. What are the main barriers to involve stakeholders in cities successfully? So, SUMP is a strategic planning process. So it starts with the definition of targets. Where do we want to go? And it's a long duration of time you have to oversee. So you're not talking about single measures, and what we see here is that people are not so familiar to talk about strategies, but they are more familiar, or they are more interested if they are directly affected by a measure, for example by residential parking or something. So then they start talking and they start arguing. There is a lack of political will to see that participation process have a benefit. There are limited financial and personal capacities, there are lack of skills, and there's also a consultation fatigue, and also quite a problem which was mentioned was the imbalance of stakeholders. So there are stakeholder groups which can articulate themselves very well, and other groups which are underrepresented, and this is still a problem in participation. Who really takes part in the participation process, and is this representative for a certain group? But I can't give you a clear recipe for this.
what we also see is that if you want to guarantee a participation process, or at least carry out something attractive people are interested in, the way how you set up the procedure is very central. So how and the internal process within the administration is quite important. So one of the approach would be to carry out a self-assessment within the city administration and to identify the status of participation within the administration, to define targets. What do we want? What kind of participation format do we want to choose? Who do we want to integrate? What do we want to achieve? So the development of a participation strategy is helpful, and also to set up a dialogue structure and a process organization and the definition of responsibilities. Is there a department responsible for participation, or this is more decentralized, organized system? So the clarification of resources is quite important, because there are no real resources available in the city administration. And the review of skills and participation competences are also very important. And what we see in reality is that that a moderator can help, and external help from other experts are quite helpful. So again, it's a very good example. They had a step-by-step approach starting in the 19th, and now they are testing transition approaches and like tools like co-creation. And also the example of Dresden is a very interesting case, where you can see that you have, if you decide for a participation process to set up an SUNP, you are facing quite a very complex process. Conclusions are that the involvement of citizens and stakeholders is a key element of sustainable urban mobility planning. There's systematical engagement throughout the different planning phases are required, but there's still a number of questions in regard to participation that have not yet been solved. And but moving back to non-participation is not an option. And collaborative planning is still a new approach, and which requires a learning curve on both sides, on the administration side as well as the side of the citizens. I think the Ghent example is there quite an interesting example for that. How the administration is a learning organization as well as the citizens themselves. This is a vision of the challenge cities, where they see themselves in the year 2020, and more or less all cities stated that SUNP and as well participation is an issue, and that they would like to improve their participation procedures. So, okay. Thank you very much for listening.
I believe that the topic is quite interesting, so for sure everybody agrees in taking some minutes in order to deliver questions to Suzanne. Who is the first? Name and affiliation, please.
Hello, my name is Thomas Sandler. I'm from Newcastle University in the UK. I found the presentation by Nick, Natalie and Suzanne very interesting. I come from a logistics and freight background myself, and I'm particularly interested in the degree to which the delivery of goods and services during the construction and development of cities, and also in the ongoing life of a city, has been incorporated into sustainable mobility platforms. We're very interested in the comments on that.
I could say for the Washington, D.C. metropolitan region, there is a freight planning effort. We have a freight planning committee. And we have stakeholders on that group that represent the freight industry as well as government. Part of the issue also with freight is it's not just on the roadway infrastructure, but also on the railway infrastructure, because there are a lot of freight providers who own the railway systems, and then when the passenger transport commuter trains are trying to use those same rails, there seems to be some issues just because of capacity. And recently, there's a bridge in Washington, D.C. It's called the Long Bridge. There's a study going on to actually expand that bridge to allow for more freight movement up and down the eastern coast of the U.S. And the residents around that particular area are not too keen on that expansion, and which would also help passenger transportation as well. So there's been a lot of dialogue and a lot of public participation in that particular arena, which is kind of fascinates me. But the level of degree that Suzanne, what you're talking about, and we already have some of that going on, but I think there's more of it to come, just because of the growth that's forecasted in many of these urban areas. It's population and as well as employment. And it's not just in DC, it's all over. So I think the key to it is dialogue, understanding each side, and coming to some type of either a win-win situation or compromise, which some folks don't like compromising, but sometimes you have to do that. Or sometimes, legislation is passed and this is just the way it's going to be. It really just depends on that situation. So I'll let my colleagues maybe get something.
Yeah, well, so the concept of SMP says that not only passenger but also freight transport and city logistics has to be covered within SUMP. So this also means to integrate those kinds of different stakeholders. And I know that in Berlin and also in Dresden there has been an extensive stakeholder process also with those kind of stakeholders being carried out. But I don't know the details and if there are special conflicts, but I know that this field in transportation is quite very, let's say, very difficult to change, I would say, and it's very, very special dynamics and other stakeholders than in the passenger transport. So, but nevertheless, I think that's the necessity also to find a dialogue with those kind of stakeholders, like in the Ile-de-France, they found a very good way, straightforward, to integrate companies in their planning.
Yeah, no. Can you add something which was about the logistics? I know. Okay, other questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, Stefan Koch, Ireland. One aspect I'm interested in, whether that plays any role in the whole sum process, and specifically to Susanne and Nathalie, is in the whole process of mobility national and travel planning companies, etc., etc. Is there a big importance, as it is in the UK and Ireland, of the whole health aspect? The whole thing of promoting active travel by cycling and walking to fight growing obesity levels, overweight issues, etc., etc. I don't know, Nathalie, whether there was one part, whether I read that right, was it in Assurance Maladie, something like that, that was also a partner in there? So the question is, how big a role is this whole health aspect, health promotion aspect, and public health promotion thing playing in the whole sum process? Or is it at all?
So the question would...
understand for the ladies.
Actually, I know an example from the UK where this close connection has been made between health and health aspects and SMT. So I don't know an example here from the continent exactly, but I think it's more. But this is some to think out of the box is, I think, one of the main challenges of SEOD, and also one of the big advantages to have a connectivity between different policy fields, and also to say, okay, this our mobility structure has an impact on human health, and those kind and the change of the long-term vision for a change in mobility behavior has much more effect than improvement of safety and air quality, but also on health effects like reduction of obesity, for example. To make this connection, I think, is something which is required.
Yeah. Well, I mean, surely to evaluate even ex ante the value of a transport plan, you have to consider which kind of effect can have on the external cost induced by mobility. So there, at least concerning the safety, there is already something to be taken into account. Obviously, the interactions between the other effect, like pollution, that is the most direct. There are cohort studies already done. I don't know, Leicester, since a long time ago, I heard of it. Obviously, it's much more difficult to understand which kind of impacts and the value the impacts can have, congestion and other kinds of stress. But I think that the link will be difficult to find out, and the value even more difficult. Anyhow, in qualitative terms, probably can be immediately taken into account. This aspect that is belong to the well-being in a city that is one of the goals of the sun. No questions more? Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the speakers. I think that they delivered very interesting speech and presentation. I'd like to thank the audience that has been quite numerous, and I appreciate it. I want to remind you that this has been the first session on sound and mobility management. We have another 3 planned, 2 tomorrow and another one on Friday. And now we go to, let's say, general. Tomorrow the session will be more specific on national and local implementation of this. Thank you again, and let's go joining the debate. Thanks a lot.